Thanks so much for having me. Good evening. My name is Reva Schwartz. I'm a research scientist at NIST in the Information Technology Laboratory. For those of you who don't know NIST, we are a federal agency under the Department of Commerce whose mission is to promote U.S. innovation and industrial competitiveness. NIST plays a central role in advancing critical and emerging technologies, whether that's AI or quantum or advanced communications or a lot of other things that we do on campus. NIST has a long-standing reputation for cultivating trust in technology by participating in the development of standards and metrics, both here in the US and internationally. These standards strengthen measurement science and make technology more secure, usable, interoperable, robust, reliable, and in other words, more trustworthy. Yeah, there we go. I am part of the Trustworthy and Responsible AI team here at NIST. I was part of the core group developing the AI risk management framework and the lead architect on the AI RMF playbook, which is a companion piece. We'll be discussing all of those things this evening. And like Justin said, I'm gonna kind of start with a kind of main overview details of what the RMF is and how people can use it, and then we'll dig into, we'll take a little break and then we'll dig into a deeper dive into the pieces of the core. So we were directed by congressional mandate in January 2021 to develop a risk-based framework for managing the risks of AI. It is voluntary, non-regulatory framework for managing risks posed by AI technology. The framework adopts a rights-preserving approach to AI. This basically means that we put the protection of individual rights at the forefront of the development and the use of AI. It is not a checklist. It's meant to help organizations align their internal culture and practices with intended aims and shared societal values. It's designed to be practical and to adapt to the tech landscape as AI continues to develop. So we have developed the AI risk management framework. We intend to keep it as is for about 3 to 5 years. It was released in January, but the playbook is continuously updated. People can send us their feedback for things that they think should be in there. And we update that twice per year, just about as often as you do your Applied AI conference. Systems can, perform accurately and also be harmful. So this is why we operationalize 7 trustworthy characteristics. This is bigger than accuracy. Those trustworthy characteristics we'll get to on another page, but basically the framework is intended to enable organizations to consider risks, to think about those trustworthy characteristics, consider risks from a broader socio-technical perspective. And what does that mean? What does that word mean? It just means in placing system-centric activities, so the technology itself, alongside and connected to efforts related to AI product governance, human factors, and the consideration of real-world impacts within their specific contexts. So it's a little overview. As you can see, while we were mandated in January 2021, we kicked off the process in July 2021 with an RFI. That's Washington, D.C. speak. I'm sure you all know that as well, or a request for information. NIST doesn't do anything without getting broad feedback and building consensus. Over those 18 months, we had 3 public workshops, the RFI plus 2 versions of the draft that people could comment on. In the end, we heard from over 240 organizations across private industry, civil society, academia, federal, state, and local government agencies, as well as international government agencies and standards orgs. So here's some kind of key terminology that I think sets the stage as we move on. We did not define AI in the framework. That is a very risky, controversial endeavor. We instead decided to define AI systems. And AI system, the definition here, where we're talking about things that generate any output, such as predictions, recommendations, or decisions. It may influence real or virtual environments, and it can operate with varying levels of autonomy. This puts generative AI squarely in the scope of the AI RMF and its practices We say that because, of course, the generative AI boom started just before the January 2023 release of the framework, and people were like, oh, I guess you have to start all over again. And of course, no, sorry, GAI is directly in scope. And in fact, we're developing a profile right now, which is a version of the AI RMF playbook for the risks of generative AI. We're doing this through a public working group. I can share that information with you all at the end of this talk, and you can get involved. This profile is intended to be released in 2024. And then secondly, the definition of risk. We define risk as an event's probability of occurring and the magnitude or degree of consequences should that event occur. So that means that impacts or consequences can be positive or negative, and they can result in either opportunities or threats. So this gets to a lot of amazing things that AI can do. It also comes with a lot of risks. So I mentioned the 7 trustworthy characteristics. The core precept of the framework is AI system trustworthiness within a culture of responsible AI practice and use. While views about what makes an AI technology trustworthy differ, there are certain key characteristics of trustworthy systems. We describe those, as you see in front of you, as valid and reliable. That's at the bottom, because if it's not valid and reliable, nothing else really kind of matters here. It also, of course, has to be safe, secure and resilient, accountable and transparent, explainable and interpretable, privacy enhanced, and fair with harmful bias managed. Of course, bias is a tricky topic. And in fact, I am the principal investigator here at NIST for AI bias. We released a document titled SP 1270. You're going to be looking for the final draft of that document. I can also share that, where we taxonomize AI bias. So that's another document you can look at. The framework describes how each of these 7 components can interrelate and the trade-offs involved in the decisions about how safe is safe, how private is private, or how to enhance interpretability, while preserving privacy. And then, of course, responsible AI, or responsible use and practice of AI, is a counterpart to AI system trustworthiness. So AI systems tend to not be inherently bad or risky on their own. It's usually the contextual environment that determines whether or not a negative impact is going to occur. So building up the organizational culture for responsible practice and use can go a long way. So why is AI risk management so difficult? First of all, measuring risk is difficult. Risks in the risks that you see as you're developing machine learning tools are quite different than how they unfold in the real world, where people tend to use, reuse, misuse, and repurpose AI in ways that were not intended. Risk tolerance, this is the organization's readiness to bear a given risk in order to achieve its objectives. So in our framework, we do not prescribe risk tolerance or buckets of risk like they have in the EU AI Act. First of all, we have no authority to do that, but we also felt that it's difficult to say for sure that one thing that seems very, very likely to be high risk, there are many occasions where that in fact can be low risk. It's so contextual. So instead, for our stakeholders and what we developed and what we landed on in the framework was that we suggested organizations align their risk tolerance with certainly with applicable laws and regulations, but also to follow existing guidelines for risk criteria, tolerance, and response as established by their organization within their domain or discipline, within their sector, or any professional requirements. Where those established guidelines do not exist, organizations should define reasonable risk tolerance and then follow the AI RMF. So what does that mean, reasonable risk tolerance? We are actually finishing up a document on that, which we will have out for public comment. It's a nice survey of the kinds of organizational risk tolerance that's out there in technology. And then, of course, prioritizing risk, which just means accepting that all risk cannot be eliminated. The framework mostly, though, focuses on methods to integrate risk management as a shared responsibility across the organization. different AI actors have different responsibilities and different levels of visibility depending on their role within the life cycle, which takes us to this next slide. This is one of the views of the AI lifecycle that we have in the framework. This is we also have one that you'll see on the next slide, this round version, so you can really see exactly how iterative it is. The important thing here is that the focus is what's in the middle, the people and the planet, this socio-technical approach, but activities within the AI RMF core take place across this life cycle, and they are iterative. We adapted our life cycle from the OECD framework for classifying AI life cycle activities. Those activities are, the OECD classified them as 5 key socio-technical dimensions. We kept that, each with properties relevant for AI policy and governance, as well as risk management. But for the purposes of the AI RMF, the thing that we did change was that we modified the life cycle to highlight the importance of test and evaluation, validation, verification throughout. So this is not continuous monitoring, but also continuous TEV, and also to generalize the operational context of the AI system. So this is kind of this stretched version of the framework, and it helps you see that each of these steps in the life cycle have these sub-steps and representative actors. The people along this life cycle are, we refer to them in the framework as AI actors. These are the people who have to work together to anticipate harms and impacts and identify AI system limitations. These also include, yes, they definitely include the people along the life cycle, but they also include end users, civil society organizations, researchers, people who are not really involved. This is all after deployment. But ultimately, governing AI is particularly challenging due to the distribution of these various teams working at different parts of the life cycle and under very, very different contexts. In the framework, we state that all involved AI actors share responsibility for designing, developing, and deploying a trustworthy AI system that is fit for purpose. Different AI actors across the life cycle can have different risk perspectives. So an AI developer who makes a generative AI model available can have a different risk perspective than the person who's responsible for deploying it. The deployer may not recognize that the particular use case could entail risks that were not, considered, earlier down in the life cycle. And then we hand it off to the users or operators who have many, many different things in mind for how they might use this tool. The framework highlights the need also to bring in external voices to inform the work happening along the life cycle, to ensure that the people and the planet are being taken into account, not as an afterthought, but from the very beginning. And this can help us understand how different AI actors interact and engage with AI technology, and how these interactions also give rise to negative impacts, but also positive impacts. So let's just take a short pause here in case there are any questions, and I can move on.
Anyone have any questions? I haven't seen anything in the chat per se, but so I was wondering about the actors piece, I guess. I mean, are there certain, I mean, I guess you talked about roles, I guess, within the organization, right?
Right, yeah, we do. And so these AI actors, representative actors, can be, we have Appendix A is in the framework is the appendix where we go through exactly what every one of these AI actor groups are, every one of them. So, the design team, the developer team, system integrators, what the kinds of activities they do, and the kinds of risks and activities they engage with. And I think what's important here to get across is that if you optimize your organization for system engineering, software engineering, model-based approaches, that's great. You're going to get your product out, but you are not necessarily going to be covering a broad set of risks and limitations because we have like this just one type of perspective. We talk a lot about the need for interdisciplinarity within within an organization to help get people better at, like, you need different perspectives. That's also hard, by the way, to operationalize, because getting different groups, different types of disciplines to talk together and work together effectively is never easy. So all of these are processes that we have specific best practices and suggestions for in the playbook.
I see. Okay. And like, if I owned a manufacturing company or something around that, was that, and maybe there's just the person who's doing the manufacturing, right? They're a technician. I mean, would I be able to find, do most of these things cover like every industry, or am I going to maybe find some holes, I guess, depending on the business?
Great question. So first of all, yeah, that's a great point. I mean, a lot of people like to say every company is a tech company now, not just big tech. So the people the AI actors that we talk about are mostly for people who are building tech along the AI lifecycle.
Gotcha.
So people, however, would be taken into consideration. The other companies, other types would be taken into consideration in the plan and design, and then the operate and monitor functions here on the lifecycle.
Gotcha.
Great. Okay, so moving on. The framework, the main, I think we take about 20 pages to get to it in the framework, but the AI RMF core is the main the star of the show, and is composed of 4 functions: govern, map, measure, and manage, or we like to say map, measure, and manage in a sea of governance. These are where risk management activities are organized. Organizations can move from principles to practice using these 4 functions. These are principles, we have this long stretch, I think maybe starting from 2018 to 2020, where a lot of organizations were like, here's our principles about AI, but how do we get to the next step? So that's what this is about. Each of those 4 functions is broken down into what we refer to as categories and subcategories. So we have 19 categories and 72 subcategories. It sounds like a lot, but organizations do not have to do any of them. They can do as many as they want. This process is iterative, and the functions can be used in any order, but people typically begin with the govern function and continue to map, measure, and manage, and then iterate from there. Function activities are designed to be implemented in a manner that reflects diverse and multidisciplinary perspectives, as we were just talking about. This includes the views of AI actors external to the organization, such as subject matter experts in a given topic, if that's what the AI technology is designed to carry out, and potentially impacted groups. So individuals and community groups or members who, knowing that a piece of technology is going to be deployed in their community, having their input early is definitely important, and we describe the need to do that and also how to follow that. So, and in the next few slides, I'm just going to provide some examples within each of these functions that are specifically focused on AI actors and risk. So first, we start with the govern function. Governance is really all about fostering risk culture. I provided a couple of examples here. We have, I think there's 6 govern that I don't have this memorized still. 6 govern categories, and this is really, in governance, this is where organizations set up its policies, procedures, practices to enable operational boundaries that align with societal values and existing legal and regulatory requirements. So yes, organizations still have to pay attention to the law and regulation and should maintain regular awareness of that and make sure that their teams are trained and aware as well. The function, this govern function, is really less about the technology itself and much, much more about fostering an internal culture that can identify and manage risk from a broad set of perspectives. So these risks and trends are going to continue to advance. Where the kinds of risks that we're seeing now, although I'm sure we will keep talking about hallucinations or confabulations for a while, but those are going to keep marching along. Organizational governance is the tool that really helps liberate organizations from playing catch up and enables the public to build trust. So without strong governance, there's a lot of things that like just all the activities can't really stick. So these are, like I mentioned, are 3 of the 6 subcategories of the govern function that are really about who gets a say and what constitutes risk and impact to help connect to better measurement for managing risk once the technology is pushed out to the real world. So, teams come from a diverse set of disciplines and backgrounds and are empowered and trained to consider risk from a broad set of perspectives. So empowerment is really an important thing. So it's one thing for your team to like see risk and from a broad set of perspectives and like know that they're tracking it, but if they're not empowered to act on it, that's another culture fix here that governance policy should go towards facilitating this kind of risk identification. Then the map function. So this is where we kind of operationalize socio-technical approaches or get the organization operating from a socio-technical footing. The map function establishes the context to frame risks related to the AI system, along with making sure that the organization has the necessary internal expertise to identify and evaluate these contextual factors. So that, again, this is bigger than AI expertise or machine learning awareness and training. What are the contextual factors here? And also expertise for knowing how to integrate external voices and external feedback into the process as is practical. Not every, small companies are not going to be able to do some large scale study with the local communities. This function really is about helping AI actors anticipate the risks of use beyond their original expectations. And so what we have here is this shows you some examples of, the first 3 categories, sample activities. So just looking at the middle one, the categorization that the AI system is performed. So this is where the AI actors would identify and document the system type, the task, the functionality, the scientific integrity of the assumptions throughout the design and development pipeline. And then we might ask ourselves, are we drawing on all of the relevant expertise as we've, informed our choices along the pipeline? Are we documenting whose views are encoded in the data and modeling choices? There's a lot of decisions that happen all day, every day, at a data science desktop, and are usually informed by data practices, but contextualized, being able to contextualize that into where this might be deployed is a very, very difficult game, no matter who that data scientist is. It's very, very difficult. And so trying to find mechanisms to enhance our awareness of these contextual factors is really key. Then the measure function. So we are NIST, we are all about measurement. This function really sets up objective, repeatable, and scalable test, evaluation, validation, and verification measures, or what we refer to as TEV, to track metrics for the trustworthy characteristics that were identified in the map function, societal impacts that may occur, and human AI configurations, for example. So if you can kind of follow where we're going, we have the governance where we set up the policies and procedures. We know that we're tracking things. We have, we're following the law. We go into the map function where people set up, okay, what context are we building for? Do we have people on staff who know about these contexts? Let's define what the system's going to do. And now we've defined what the risks are. Now in the measure function, we know, okay, this system is, the risks might relate to privacy or bias and interpretability. Those are the three of the 7 trustworthy characteristics. Let's make sure we're tracking these and measuring them. And we may not be able to measure these, some of these risks quantitatively from the beginning. That may be, we're just tracking something, some kind of qualitative measure. So not everything's going to be quantitative at the start. Here's the measure function has 4 categories. But there's a real challenge with doing these categories because many existing measurement approaches in machine learning are really model and system centric, using a small set of constrained proxy-based tasks, often measuring one characteristic, usually accuracy, and where we're kind of unable to measure potential impacts at all. But so we measure inside the box and we're focused on accuracy. That's kind of just where we're at. It's not a bad thing, it just is. And so for trustworthy AI and AI risk, we need to get a little better at evaluating performance of the model or this in the system within its context of use, to kind of help improve our gap in understanding. If we're measuring inside the box and within the model, and we say, okay, demographic parity metrics are a good example of this, that we see our system is balanced for a certain demographic group, and we deploy it, and we get a bunch of bad stuff happens, which happens all the time in AI or any technology, or although we don't know exactly how often it does happen. What can we do? These kinds of measurements, we have to get better at measuring within context. So what kinds of sensors can we take into consideration once these systems are deployed? So getting measurement approaches to match the AI RMF requirements, not requirements, but the outcomes, is going to take some time. And NIST is working on developing those types of measurements and methodologies. And then finally, the manage function. This is where organizations are going to allocate resources to treat the risks that have been mapped and measured, and in line with the policies established in the govern function. Risk treatment generally entails responding to, recovering from, and communicating AI system failures and negative impacts. So you can see here some of the risk management approaches that are kind of well understood and well used are data management approaches, decommissioning mechanisms such as kill switches, incident response plans, which are absolutely can't do anything without incident response, insurance warranties and other risk transfer mechanisms, recourse and feedback mechanisms, and policies for those that were established in the govern function. I had mentioned our playbook. It's an online resource that was developed. We developed this to give organizations a how-to if they'd like to achieve the outcomes described in the framework core that we just went through, all of those 72. Actually, for every single 72 of those subcategories, we have tens of recommendations. We also have a set of references that we update regularly if people want to do a deep dive and learn more about any of these topics. The playbook is now available in various formats. We have it, it had been online in JSON, Excel, and CSV. We just got the PDF up about a month or so ago. It is 220 pages, I apologize. It is not, however, something that is meant to be read from cover to cover. So it's meant to be like, I'm looking for, map 2.4, I'm gonna go to map 2.4 and read some recommendations. But the playbook's also a venue for the community to build out suggested practices and learn from others. It's not a checklist, just like the framework's not a checklist. And organizations can identify the outcomes that are relevant for their use case. So let's say you go through, you look at these 72 subcategories, you're like, really, we're only focused on like these 10, 15, maybe 20 of these. And adopt as many suggestions for achieving those outcomes in a manner that fits their organizational skill set. And like I mentioned, we update the playbook approximately twice per year. Another activity that kind of is under the AI risk management framework are profiles. These are a primary method for organizations to share their real life examples of how they put the framework into practice in their own setting. These can be for a given industry sector, or we call these use case profiles. So hiring, housing, the financial industry, lending. They could be cross-sectoral. So large language models, the use of large language models, cloud-based services or acquisition. As I mentioned, we are doing one such profile for generative AI, the risks of generative AI. And these kinds of profiles can be done by organizations on their own, or they can work within others in their industry. It provides really an opportunity for interested parties within that industry to come together and build up a version of guidance that they can not just use within their own company, but that helps with interoperability. It's important, though, to note that these profiles are not required for using the framework. Anybody can use the framework, anytime they want. They could, open it up and say, we're going to take these 5 subcategories and build out from that, and then get started. So what's next? A roadmap. We released this roadmap along with the framework when we launched in January. As you can see, we have 10 things on the roadmap. I'm just going to pick the top 3 that we consider to be top priorities. First and foremost, standards is our middle name. So alignment with international standards is pretty high up there on the list. We are the Federal AI Standards Coordinator, and NIST works across the government and with industry stakeholders in that role to identify critical standards development activities, strategies, and gaps. This is based on priorities that were outlined in a plan that we released, I believe it was in 2019. And we just regularly track AI standards development opportunities. We collect and analyze information about agencies, standards related activities elsewhere in the government. And we make recommendations through the US government interagency process to optimize engagement. Second is expanded test and evaluation efforts. As I mentioned, it's really difficult right now for, we have a set of measurements that are great, but really require new refresh for addressing risks and impacts out in the real world. We will continue to do both and improve the existing test and evaluation measures that are already out there, and then move into new approaches, and then doing AI RMF profiles with private industry and civil society and academia, whoever wants to build those profiles. And I think finally, this is our last one. So we developed, for all of this content, we knew we needed to put it somewhere other than just our NIST.gov webpage. So we created something called the NIST Trustworthy and Responsible AI Resource Center. That can be found at airc.nist.gov. That is where we house our playbook. We have a glossary of 800 terms in Trustworthy and Responsible AI. We have a standards track, if you want to stay on top of AI standards. We do not have the metrics hub up yet, but it will be there. But basically, the resource center is kind of a one-stop shop for our foundational content. We also have all of our technical documents there that I had mentioned, for example, our bias document, but there are other, the framework itself is in there. And this is where you can find us online on our NIST.gov webpage, our resource center, and then our email address at aiframework@nist.gov. And I will stop there.
Fabulous. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Reva. We've had a couple questions come in. David, I'll ask it for him, and if you want to unmute yourself, you definitely can. But it was kind of some of the same thoughts that I was having. He says, I'm wondering how the framework deals with unintended consequences, or how it might deal with emergent properties that seem to happen in generative AI systems.
Yeah, so specific to generative AI risks, like I mentioned, and I'll get the link when I have a second here. We are developing this. We have this public working group. We have, when we started this, we opened it up at the end of June. We have 2,600 people in this public working group who are all helping us. It's huge. And we're focusing on 4 subtopics. So it's the working group, and then we have 4 subgroups. Pre-deployment testing. So some of that's red teaming, but it's bigger than red teaming. We have content provenance. So how do people know that they are dealing with generated content, and how do we track that generated content and real content, and we don't lose reality? We have AI governance, and then we also have incident disclosure. So the emergent properties, of which that is not necessarily a a real thing. There's a lot of research that says that that's actually the outgrowth of the different ways that you can measure. That looks like it's emergent properties, but it may not be. So all of those, this kind of gets back to this question of, does the AI RMF cover the risks of generative AI? We are pretty old-fashioned in this way that if you can identify the risk, we should be able to track it, right? So it's really first risk identification, and then mapping and measuring and managing it. And then, how do we know it's a risk? That's that whole issue of different viewpoints, different perspectives, and making sure that things are actually risks or new risks.
Yeah, so maybe you can talk a little bit about what happens in the framework when a new unforeseen risk comes up.
Yeah. So that's really what it's all about, right? Is a unforeseen from somebody along the life cycle. How do we track that? So first, somebody has to identify it, and that's the reason why we talk about these interdisciplinary approaches, bringing in different perspectives, and but also testing. Testing and evaluation under the context of use can help us identify these unforeseen risks. Getting better along the life cycle at communicating across the life cycle. So what's a limitation, what the deployment team is seeing, they may not realize that the people on the other end of the life cycle didn't see. So communication, interdisciplinarity, testing and evaluation, I think, is kind of, those are all about identifying unforeseen, the unknown unknowns.
Yeah, because I was thinking through the speed at which these things are happening. Yeah. And so one of the thoughts I was having is, we can try to identify, we can try to measure, right? But it seems like, are there concerns where things get out of control crazy fast, right? So is there something in the framework of this risk management of a kill switch?
Yeah.
Holy shit. Abort.
Shut it off. Yes, kill switches are kind of a managed tool, but all of that is under the heading of decommissioning, system decommission, and incident tracking, incident disclosure, information sharing. But sometimes you don't have time for information sharing as fast as this happens, right? So if you have, like in cybersecurity, there's our long-held information sharing groups. They meet regularly, but those are tracking long-term risks, not something that came out of nowhere and then escalated way too fast. You don't have time for your monthly meeting. So decommissioning that is covered in governance, and then the processes for doing decommissioning are carried out and managed. So basically in the govern function, the management would set a policy for what is the threshold of what needs to happen within your organization to determine, like, when do we pull, when do we just shut it down? So, but yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
There was a question here from David, which I think is really good. I hadn't really thought about this. He says, given the multidisciplinary nature of the AI RMF, Where does it typically reside in an organization? Does IT, information technology, usually own it?
That's a great question. So first of all, I will tell you that there was a great discussion within the group, we talked about this at some of our workshops of like, who was the audience for the AI RMF? Because traditionally, like the NIST cybersecurity framework and the privacy framework are mostly for the compliance team. But we knew that if we just spoke to the compliance team, that the people along the life cycle would be like, it's not our problem, right? Like, oh, well, it's the lawyer's problem. But we wanted to be very clear that this takes the whole enterprise. So I think it depends on the organization, but it does sit probably in compliance, but it requires IT engagement.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Doug, you had a couple questions here. Maybe you just want to say them.
Yeah, one is I'm interested in providing more information on generative AI standards. One standards organization I'm involved with is Oceanus, which is the Open Community for Ethics and Automation and Intelligent Systems. So I was wondering if you're familiar with that, and is NIST involved? Is there a good document that kind of tracks on all these standards bodies on generative AI?
Yeah, so I had mentioned that we have a standards hub on our webpage. I actually don't think it's now operational, but the best place to go to we tend to track standards through ISO, through the International Standards Organization, and also IEEE. But there's a standards entity called Insights that we also play a big role in. And NIST is the standards coordinator, the AI standards coordinator for the federal government. So we do stay on top of all of these standards. For generative AI, as far as I'm aware, there is no current standard just for standalone generative AI. Our profile that we are developing is going to possibly be one of the first set of best practices for dealing with the risks of generative AI. Again, just in those 4 subcategories of how do we govern for generative AI, how do we manage incidents, et cetera. So yeah, I think we do not specifically track just generative AI standards, but we do track everything that's happening as far as I know. There is not a specific generative AI.
But your total AI list would include generative.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the second question I had was about NTIA. They asked for comments from the public about responsible AI. Mm-hmm. And I had started looking at a few of those comments from different organizations. There was probably about 80 of them that came from corporations, which I was focusing on. One question I had is NIST involved in any of how does NIST and NTIA, that role between the 2 organizations?
Yeah, so they are a sister agency for us because they are also under the Department of Commerce, and we regularly, speak to them on matters related to AI. Their work, and they, we talk to them about their work. They talk to us about ours. So yeah, we do regularly interact on these topics.
So, like these comments, does that impact the NTIA comments? Does that impact some of your thinking of from a NIST perspective, or?
Well, what the comments that they get are things related to things that are under their purview, so it wouldn't necessarily affect what we do. Okay. And they know, this is the challenge in the federal government is whose lane is it? But I think we're all pretty, aware of what kind of activities they carry out are different from ours.
Okay.
Different from our purview.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your overview. Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
Did I get that right, Reva, that you said there were 2,600 people, I guess, involved in this across industries for this? 2,600
people in our generative AI public working group, yes. And that is a mix of private industry, civil society, academia, federal government. We also just have, it's very exciting, we just have regular Americans, just in, teachers, and everybody's really excited about generative AI. So you don't have to be an expert in generative AI. You can just show up and provide us your suggestions. I can grab that login to that link while we're going questions.
Could I ask another question?
Yes, please go.
So I'm trying hard to frame this in my head with who's the audience for this, right? And maybe this is a stupid way to frame it in my head, but are there players or are there actors who won't adhere or won't care about this framework? And how then, like if you create a framework that creates extra work for org A, and then org B says, I don't think it's that bad, and they just go, right? And then org A is now hindered by this extra work. What's the thought process there?
Yeah, so I mean, this gets to the 240 organizations that we worked with. So we built consensus across a big section of private industry. Of those 240, it was probably 65% of that was private industry, and maybe all the big players were there in the beginning, but over time people began to see like, oh, we better pay attention. This is building a framework. We want to make sure we have our voice in there. We tend to not. We don't, the development of a framework is not a prescriptive matter. We take everybody's suggestions equally. So we had all those thousands of pages of comments and workshop discussions. So in the end, I think that those companies are pretty happy with it. We know those companies have adopted, many companies have adopted it, including those companies that we did not have on our radar during the development of the framework. But so is there an incentive? I guess what you're saying is, is there an incentive to why bother? I think that is the voluntary nature of the framework gives people the opportunity to say, like, there's no downside to it, like to adopting as much of it as you can. You should get a bump up in efficacy and in your processes. You should have a better visibility into risks and limitations of your technology. There are aspects that might be difficult for small and medium organizations to implement, which is definitely something we knew about and we talked about during the development of the framework. And we think it would be very good for somebody to do a small, medium-sized company profile for the AI RMF. Like, how should small companies really adopt it, and what are their minimum standards there? So, yeah. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and it leads me to the other question, or another question of, does this get applied to, say, the research space, right? So say American universities then doing research in AI, like, oh, we should implement this framework, right? And then maybe it's just the wrong way to see it, but American universities have to use this framework versus, God, this is gonna sound bad, but like a Chinese university, right? They're both trying really hard to get to the next, big thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, that's a great question. And a question that we heard continuously was like, well, why should I do this? Like, why should I do that? What benefit does responsible AI give to me? And I mean that.
Well, I think it's slightly different than that, in that like, we all want to be good humans, right? And like, we want to do this, but I feel like there comes a point when you're in competition with someone else, and that dynamic then changes, because I want to be a good human, but Stanford over here is like kicking our ass and they're not using this, right?
Well,
so like,
we think that there's a bigger so honestly, one word you don't see, and we don't really talk a lot about ethics in the framework, because it's about trustworthy and responsible AI. So it's really because we know that that is not often a motivating factor for corporations to they're not doing things out of the goodness of their own heart. But we think that it's not just about, sometimes it's about saving money, right? That the cost of, there's technical debt and there's ethical debt, and being able to figure out all the processes in your, along the life cycle that are costing you something that you don't have a handle on right now. This can help you figure that out and save money. It's going to take time though for people to figure that out, and that's the kind of behind the scenes work that I think has to happen across all of those stakeholders. I will say, academia had a big role to play in the development of the framework. They are very active in the framework community. The federal government, we NIST are putting the framework into use in our laboratories and our research labs, and in a way that gets to, and this one of the things on the roadmap that I didn't get to is measuring the effectiveness of the framework for an organization. Like, what does it get you, especially compared to what you were doing before? How do we measure that? So we had this, beginning state, and then you've instituted this intervention and this new way of doing things. What did it get you? And we are very, very interested in hearing those stories from all of our framework stakeholders and users. But we also need to be more systematic about measuring that effectiveness. But yeah, a very good question. I would say, like, watch this space.
Yeah. For sure. Well, we're just about at the hour here. Yeah, I guess I just had a quick question. We're talking about, like, why would you do this? I mean, are you guys gonna have like a little badge or something like that I could say, well, I'm adhering to these, and it's kind of like, if you're not, then people are going to start questioning your yeah, I guess, your solution, whatever you're putting in the market.
Yeah, I mean, we want it to be more than that. We really would much rather have, rather than people say, oh, we're using it, don't ask us any questions, we're doing a good job, we're using this thing. Yeah. We want people to have the benefits of the culture change. So yeah, I'm just grabbing this sign up. Here we go. For the public working group, and then I will let you all no, that's not it either. I think we have, here we go, here's the form. Here's the sign up form. So if anybody wants to join our generative AI public working group, you can sign up here. I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, I'll send a message. I usually have a follow-up message here to everybody who attended or didn't attend. Let me cut and paste this out of here. So if anyone were to have missed this or whatever, I'll make sure that this gets posted on our Meetup group as well.
Great. Well, thanks.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Reva. Really, really appreciate it. And sounds like it's a work in progress, right? This is just a certain times. You showed us a roadmap, and there's certain things that you're still getting to along the way, but it's super exciting. And yeah, I'm glad that this organization is putting some standards together. I think it's there's just a lot going on in this space, so it's good to kind of coalesce a community of 2,600 people together and make sure that we're sort of building the technology the right way.
Well, I hope to see you all on the Slack channel. That's how we all engage on the generative AI public working group, and then don't hesitate to reach out with any questions as well.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, thanks everyone for attending tonight. Quick reminder, our next meetup is Thursday, November 2nd. And if you're on the Meetup group, we also have an AI and product management meeting that's coming out. That's going to be happening a week from this Friday. So if you go to appliedai.mn, you'll see all the events. But thanks again, everyone. Thanks, Reva. You have a good rest of your night, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks.